Hey everyone, my name's. Anyway, today we're going to talk about a story, a sad one, called The Sad Story of Henry. And I'm not making up that title, it's a real name of an episode for a children's show called Thomas the Tank Engine. Have you heard of it? I'm sure you have. Anyway, this show came out a long time ago. It's still around today, but our kids, kids of Gen X or millennials, would probably be watching like this kind of 3D animation version of it. But for our generation, it was really a lot of puppeteering when we were kids watching it. And so I can't really show this show, obviously, any of it, because the last time I did a video on Thomas the Tank Engine, even though I didn't put any audio and put my own, it still got claimed, even though it was fair use because it was parody. I'll show you the video in the corner, not show you, but you can check that out if you want. I put a lot of production into it to try to make it fun and a kind of funny parody, like I used to do on the channel. There are other channels that I have, but if I'm going to continue making stuff for this channel, it just can't be something where I'm putting so much effort into production, like different cuts, movements everywhere, explosions. Listen, when I was in university, I took a course called Ancient Chinese Philosophy. And my professor, he was like straight up the most stereotypical professor you would imagine when it comes to ancient Chinese philosophy. The dude looked ancient, and he was Chinese. So. Anyway, that's not important. He definitely had the beard, he had everything. He is the shroud of wisdom when he spoke with his accent, and he had a very important lesson that he would share with the class on more than one occasion, oddly enough, about how he makes sure to wake up every morning, take a walk out to his tree in the backyard, and take a shit on it. I'm not making that up. It's a real thing, he would say, to make sure he goes and by the tree and take a shit. Now his reasoning actually was fairly good. It's not like he would just leave it out in the open. He would water it down so that nobody had to like smell it or anything, but it was important to get the nutrients of the manure into the soil. Of course, that's what people do with manure. People pay for manure. And the interesting thing is that when it comes to human beings, because we eat so much food, different varieties of food, we have all sorts of nutrient profiles that come into and out of our system. Our manure is the best in the world. And so if your life is full of shitty people, or you're just dealing with a life that feels like shit, that's an opportunity there. You can grow the most beautiful flowers. That was the whole point of this channel in the beginning, to make these little beautiful creations of mine just for the sake of me having them. I have other channels where I try to accomplish more and do more in life with those channels, but this one was sort of initially just to be about having fun and trying to keep sane in a world and in a job placement in my life where I really was losing it. And this was an episode that I was going to do at some point in time, to make fun of episode 2 of this children's show, which is, I think, the actual episode 2. Like, I literally think it's the second episode they ever made. And it's quite interesting. It's just kind of funny. But take it with a grain of salt. I don't really mean everything I'm saying here with such level of seriousness. I am kind of content producing in that sense, because I will be a little bit hyperbolic or whatever, because I'm just trying to have fun with it. But it is interesting. So I don't think this episode really damaged or psychologically traumatized the children or anything like that. But, hey, let me tell you what happens in the episode, and you tell me. So, the sad story of Henry is about this guy who's not a guy, I mean, he's a train. Anyway, so the train goes into the tunnel but doesn't want to get out the other side of the tunnel. Henry is someone who seems to very much put their self-worth and a whole identity into their external appearances, very much concerned with the paint, the green paint and the red stripe that they have on outside, and is so irrationally afraid of the possibility of rain that is no longer willing to exit the tunnel. Sorry, that was an alarm. To exit the tunnel and continue doing their daily work. We would now consider this level of anxiety debilitating, that surely somebody needs to intervene to help somebody who is suffering so greatly with their mental health issues that they can no longer continue doing what was actually a part of normal daily life for this person. So Henry's not able to escape. The guard comes out with some of the patrons, I guess, and try to encourage him to get out of the tunnel, but clearly Henry's not having it. Henry's like, I wouldn't come out just for you. But then Sir Topham Hatt, who's also called a Fat Controller, and is continuously called a Fat Controller throughout the episode. But I'll call him Fat... I'll call him Sir Topham Hatt rather than continually calling him Fat Controller. I don't think it was meant as a body-shaming thing at that time. At that time, I think it just more so has to do with, and we'll see why it kind of has to do with, some reasoning it has to do with, pretty much being critical of those who are in positions of power. There's kind of some social commentary going on in this thing, which you wouldn't have noticed as a child checking it out. But clearly Sir Topham Hatt with his top hat is kind of portrayed as some kind of elitist, and we'll check out the reasons why next in a couple of minutes. But I think calling him a Fat Controller kind of has to do with, calling people fat cats at that time, because they consume and they fill their bellies with the hard work and food and hard work that the underclass have worked for. And why fat cats are called cats, I think it has to do with aristocrat, and somehow aristocrat turns into aristocat. And yes, everybody wants to be a cat. I'm sorry, I don't actually believe that at all, but it was a necessary compulsion. Look, it was very catchy when we were young, okay? Anyway, that's not the point. The point is... Oh, shit, what was the point? The point is, I'm not going to keep calling him the Fat Conductor, but I assure you that they literally did that in the rest of this episode. I'm going to keep trying to call him Sir Topham Hatt, though. So I'm just going to point out here that there's actually a number of differences from the original UK version to the American version. And it seems like the American version actually censored a number of things. Specifically, and including this one too, that they don't even ever call him the Fat Controller. Like, they only call him Sir Topham Hatt. So if you've never even heard of this guy being called the Fat Controller, then you've probably never watched the UK version and only watched the censored version in America. There's a couple of other censored things too throughout this episode that I'll talk about, but I just wanted to point this out because if somebody goes and watches this in the kind of American version, and what I say by American is just that it got redubbed with a person doing with an American accent rather than a UK accent, I can't really tell whether they both came out at the exact same time or not, and one came later and it just got updated, but this is one of the things that got censored out of it. They stopped calling him the Fat Controller anyway, but definitely in that, or what I'm calling original, if it even is that, they continued calling him the Fat Controller. It might be because they censored they were concerned about fat phobia even then and body shaming even then, but I think it could also be because America is a little bit kinder back then to those in positions of power, because they don't have the same kind of history and relationship towards monarchies and aristocracies and those elitists in the positions of power that other nations have, particularly the UK and Europe. So when it comes to that, Americans, at least at that time, had a kind of more positive outlook on those in positions of power because of capitalism and just thinking that, oh, it's free and fair for everyone, so I'm in a position of power, it must mean I deserve it and all that stuff. Anyway, there are a couple of other censorship things here that we'll talk about when they come up. So anyway, when Sir Topham Hatt does get there, he literally threatens to physically pull him out instead. It's immediately his first go-to move, rather than discussing anything with him. But really, Henry wasn't having it at all. And Sir Topham Hatt don't play. If he's threatening you because you're not performing the duties required of your job in service of his railway as he is the owner of all the engines on those tracks, then he will punish you. And he does. He actually tries to get everybody to physically pull him out while obviously not participating himself. And that's not some commentary of mine that I'm making up. The narrator himself kind of puts this funny joke in there by noting how Sir Topham Hatt isn't himself participating and says, no, my doctor says I shouldn't be pulling things. So, it's like he had bone spurs. Look, I'm not trying to get political, but there are clearly some resemblances to reality when it comes to those in positions of powers or the elite and their ability to push off responsibilities onto those who don't have the privilege of creating manufactured medical reasons to escape those responsibilities. Those are a lot of words. I'll try not to do that again. But, I won't make any promises.
Yeah, so this is actually another or second thing here with that censorship. Like in the American version, it's not so clear that the conductor is at fault, that he's just kind of making up an excuse. Like in the UK version, it's quite clear because he does a kind of coughing thing too. He goes, "Yeah, I've got a doctor's note. I can't pull things." And even later, they do it too. Actually, they try to get the people to push him out and makes the same kind of comment with the same excuse, with that kind of coughing thing about how a doctor's given him a note as to why he can't push him out. Now, it's clear in the American version too that, Sir Topham Hatt isn't participating in doing this either, so I don't want to say like Americans completely cut that out at all, but it's still more poignant in the UK version, definitely.
Anyway, so this guy Henry, right? He's an entire engine. Few people, 20 people, man, 50 people ain't gonna pull him out. Like, that's ridiculous. Why would you think that? So they try to reason with him, sort of, and try to be like, hey, Henry, you know you're worried about the rain, but the rain has come and gone now. Like, you can still get out now. Like, it's not gonna come back. But Henry clearly, again, vocalizes his irrational fears that it could be possible, that it might rain again. He's suffering from some kind of paranoia, which is very similar to the way philosophers consider a doubt to be, so long as it's theoretically possible, as if that's sufficient reasoning to be doubtful about something. And it's not. However, in the practical life that we live, just the mere possibility that something could go wrong should not be reason enough to impede your actual functioning. And that's clearly happening with Henry. Henry believes that if it's possible it could rain and damage my paint, which he obviously puts a great deal of importance to in evaluating himself and self-worth when it comes to physical external appearances, then he's not willing to go to or threaten that self-worth for any reason at all, even though he was commanded to by his master. Okay, so it wasn't his master, but you know what I mean. They tried to pull him out, they tried to reason with him, wasn't working. Then they called up backup from Thomas, somebody you might know. Thomas is like a small engine in the show. He kind of pushes his other engines around, not like a bully, but just to kind of arrange them on the tracks at the station to connect them up to other cargo stuff and stuff like that. That's the kind of role he has. So when it comes to having to push Henry out of the tunnel, it definitely makes sense that would try to call Thomas to do it. And Thomas does come and does try to physically force Henry out of the tunnel again, but Henry ain't having that either. Henry is actually a little bit bigger tank than Thomas. Thomas is meant to kind of push people around who are on sort of neutral, if you think about it. Not some other engine who's actively trying to put power against him, or, might have stronger brakes than Thomas can actually push. And now, here's kind of where things get messed up. Like, real bad. Well, the Fat Controller, Sir Topham Hatt. Well, Sir Topham Hatt really wasn't having it with Henry, and literally makes another threat when he's at the end of his leash. And his threat this time is to bury Henry alive. That if he doesn't come out, he will be buried in there. They will brick him up so that he's stuck there forever. That he has to live forever for the rest of his days. To the end of time, maybe. I don't know, but it was quite dramatic even in the show.
Now, here's a very important difference when it comes to the UK versus the American version. In the UK version, the one that I'm discussing in this video here, they do say it, even with these words, if you don't come out, we'll leave you here. We'll take away your railway so he's nothing to roll on, and we'll leave you here for always and always and always. So it is a punishment, a threat. Whereas for Sir Topham Hatt in the American version, he says we'll leave you here until you're ready to come out. So again, we're talking about the UK version, but in the American version, it does seem a little bit more conditional, like, hey, you can come out whenever you want. But in the UK version, and clearly it's from the UK version seems to make more sense with what's going on, and I'll get to that next. But in the UK version, it is, we're going to leave you here forever.
And I'm not making that up. It's literally what Sir Topham Hatt's solution was to the situation, to threaten Henry again. And Henry wasn't having it. So Sir Topham Hatt invested his resources and efforts to ensure that workers come and brick up Henry alive in the tunnel.
Again, it's pretty clear in the UK version that he says that they're bricking him in specifically so that he can never get out. But in the American version, the US version, they say that they're breaking him in just so that no one else bumps into him? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You're removing the rail track so nobody could have rolled into him by accident anyway. You wouldn't have had to have a brick to prevent someone from rolling into him, and they would still end up rolling into the brick. So that didn't make sense. And they have a stopper there too. Clearly, this whole bricking up type of thing was done specifically as a punishment, and the UK version does have it right. The bricking up was done to punish him in order to imprison him.
A place from which he is suffering from mental health, and clearly his what's it called? Ambrophobia, which I definitely didn't need to look up right now on Google. Anyway, it's the fear of rain. His ambrophobia is not being treated with any level of seriousness or respect. It's like it's just a funny little joke for him and everyone's getting real pissed off. And now Sir Topham Hatt is to the degree of his rope where he's, does that make sense? He's the end of his leash, end of his rope? Something. He's just really pissed off and he's willing to, and he's gonna bury this motherfucker alive. So he's now got workers bricking him up to stay there as punishment. Now look, I was a kid when I watched this myself, if I even watched this episode. I don't really remember if I did, but I'm just kind of having fun here. Like, don't take it too seriously, like what I'm saying. It's not so traumatizing, like how dare they show this to children or something like that. It's not that bad. I remember watching it, and the kids who watch this show, as I was saying, kids of the boomers who watch this show, because, Thomas the Tank Engine now is like a 3D thing. I don't think they would show this kind of message necessarily now to the generations, the children of Gen X and millennials who have children watching the Thomas the Tank Engine show now. But even if they did watch this one, I don't think it's going to affect anybody. They just like the whistles and the trains moving. But you take a step back and you reflect on this as an adult, which you might not necessarily do. You might not necessarily notice the kind of social commentary they gave about being critical of this kind of elitist bourgeois behavior of the Sir Topham Hatt going around bossing around other people while making medical excuses for himself. Bonesters. Sorry, I know I made the joke before, but I don't care. I'm going to make it again. The point is, if you take a step back and still reflect on how this behavior of Sir Topham Hatt even made sense, it just doesn't make sense. How could you be so violent to the nature of wanting to have to take out retributive behavior of somebody who's simply clearly suffering from some kind of issue? It's some kind of irrational belief that this person has. Why would you take your money, even if you're about the business and you're angry that your employee is not servicing you because, clearly he's your slave? But still, would you invest more resources and time out of your pocket just to punish them and bury them alive? That seems kind of extreme. But it doesn't just end there for Henry. Sir Topham Hatt actually makes sure that Henry is left a window right at the top of the brick, purposely to ensure that he can suffer while he spends the time in that bricked up tunnel. It is allowing him to see all his colleagues enjoy freedom right before his own eyes, the freedom he gave up, whistling at him and saying hello and looking at him while he has to stay in this bricked up tunnel suffering there for the end of days, supposedly. So, what was the lesson here? Well, it's a kid's show, man. They're probably not going to end it like that, like Thomas is going to come and save him, right? Nope. The episode ends. You got what you deserve. You got what you deserve, Henry. Don't work for that Sir Topham Hatt and his elitism. How dare you have mental health issues and stop performing your duties as required. We're gonna bury you alive and make sure you suffer in there forever. See other people right before your eyes, enjoying life. That's how the episode ends. Kind of strange watching it as an adult and realizing, did they really just end the episode like that? Look, don't worry too much about it. At some point in time in a later episode, they bring Henry back and they show how he comes out of the tunnel, so it's like, okay, but you didn't know that when you were watching it. Like, it's not like you had some certainty that they would bring him back at some point in time later. You didn't really know. As far as you could tell, the episode literally ended just on a negative, bad note, with Henry suffering in this prison, a punishment of eternal punishment for what is obviously a great struggle with ambrophobia, a great struggle with anxiety, a debilitating mental health issue that they try to physically force him back into work, back into labor.
So this is the last difference that I'm going to tell you about between the US and the UK version. And the US version definitely is far more positive than the UK version. The US version kind of ends by saying this, asking the viewer, how long do you think will Henry stay in there before he overcomes his fear and decides to journey out? As if it is just a matter of him overcoming his fear, that this really isn't actually a punishment on him for not performing. And it definitely makes it more clear that this is just a temporary thing, indicating certainly that it's not just possible, but likely that at some point in time, he will leave. But the UK version? Oh my, is it dark. The narrator says, I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you? Oh my god, yo, that's... No, I don't. That's terrible. Like, what? No, I don't think this is... You shouldn't be treated like this. You shouldn't be punished. And nobody really deserves a kind of eternal damnation of suffering and torture because you can't perform your duties due to some kind of mental health issue. This is really not a sensible solution at all. And it's pretty shocking.
In any case, like I said, don't take it too serious. Like, it's just me reading it a little bit more into it than obviously they necessarily wanted to. But it is kind of funny and interesting that the episode just ends like right there. It's strange. So I wanted to share that with you, and hopefully they won't claim this video again like they did the last video. It really sucked. If you like this video, I mean, I guess do like it, please. I know a lot of people don't like things, and people don't leave comments, and I don't even know if this video is going to get a lot of views. You know, you can do whatever you want, but I'm not going to end on too much of a sour negative note. So listen, if you want to be my friend, you can. Para only. Right. And you can do that by liking and subscribing to my channel. That's kind of mean, isn't it? Is there something weird about that? Like, it's not really friendship if you're my friend and I'm not really your friend, right? And you're helping me out with views and likes and comments, you know, even if, like, I don't want to see your negative comments. Please don't give me negative comments. But like, yeah, it's you guys doing stuff for me. I'm not really doing anything. Am I doing anything? Am I providing commentary for you? I don't know. Listen, all I'm trying to do with these videos is grow flowers.